So many of you watching this right now probably didn't have the opportunity to grow up in a household where what it meant to be a securely attached person was modeled to you. In fact, research shows about 50% of the population is secure and less than 50% is insecurely attached. And more cutting edge research actually shows that the amount of securely attached individuals is trending downwards. So it's not trending upwards like people would, be hopeful about, but I do have a lot of belief that with education and online information like this, it's more accessible to everybody, that people will be able to do the work to change their attachment style and become securely attached. And in fact, that's so much of what this channel is all about, is integrated attachment theory, the science and psychology of how we actually change our attachment style. But if you are somebody who's sitting here right now going, what does a securely attached relationship even look like? I'm going to tell you 5 cornerstones that securely attached people have in terms of their own conditioning that allow them to essentially be able to show up in healthy, secure, and integrated ways with others. And my hope is that you can take these 5 cornerstones, see what you are doing very effectively, and see where you can make room for improvement to really see a lot of healthy changes take place. So cornerstone number 1 is securely attached people from a very young age get something called approach-oriented behavior. That sounds like a whole bunch of gibberish if you're not super familiar with this term or concept, but approach-oriented behavior means that a caregiver, when they are raising a child, they are attuned enough to the child's emotions, social cues, emotional cues, and needs that they are able to pick up on them. But when they do pick up on them, they don't ignore or deflect them. They actually move towards the child as an attempt to soothe them. Now, what this teaches a child is that at a very young age, when they communicate emotion or distress, then somebody actually picks up on it, hears them, and goes towards them to try to soothe them. And that makes them feel worthy of expressing emotion, and also that it is safe and adaptive, in other words, healthy, to express that emotion. They also learn that they're worthy of love, even when they're in distress. Because if they're crying and upset, or if they're just stressed and flustered, a caregiver is picking up on that. And even in their imperfect moments, showing up to try to tend to them, right? So it gives a lot of messaging and conditioning that, like, I'm worthy of love in my good moments, but also in my challenging moments, which becomes very beneficial. This causes a child to feel confident in who they are and what they bring to the table. And they also feel confident in their ability to lean on people, to rely on people. They're not scared of relying on people and that not going well, or just feeling trapped in a situation where they can't get their needs met or they'll be neglected. So essentially, approach-oriented behavior, although it's one of the 5 cornerstones, it actually creates a lot of healthy dynamics for a child in terms of their upbringing and in terms of what they tend to expect. Cornerstone number 2, children learn what their needs are and how to meet them within themselves. See, securely attached children, when they grow up in an environment, they get a really healthy, essentially like border. There's an old saying that optimal growth occurs at the border between support and challenge. And securely attached children, they are supported, right? They are basically conditioned in this very healthy environment where there tends to be stability and consistency. But securely attached children are also not over supported. You usually don't have these markers of securely attached kids where we have a lot of permissive parenting, where as soon as a child cries, they're just given the candy or they're just given whatever they're crying for. No, in fact, the parents of securely attached children tend to be regulated enough within themselves that they're okay with their child being under a little bit of distress. And they leverage that little bit of distress for learning. For example, I had a parent say to me one time that, and they're very securely attached and definitely raised 2 very securely attached kids. And they said that when their child was first learning to walk, that sometimes that child would fall. And, originally they would go tend to the child, but over time, they didn't want to condition the child to be like, oh, every time you fall, you should cry. It's so sad. So they would, go and tend to the child in a way that was like, oh, get up, you can do this. Come on, no problem. And so they were supporting, but they were also simultaneously, in a sense, challenging the child to get up and to keep going. And they made room for that child to make mistakes, learn from their own mistakes, not control everything for them, not be the helicopter parent. And so what this causes is room for a child to learn to actually individuate. They learn that, well, I can rely on connection and safely connect with others. I can also actually rely on myself. I can trust myself to get back up. I can trust myself to work through what it is that I need to learn or figure out. And a lot of securely attached children were parented in environments where healthy learning was encouraged, even if it caused a certain degree of emotional distress. And that caregiver would sort of stand by, be there. So the child knew that there was this basis of support and that foundational, person to lean on. But they wouldn't have somebody do things for them, fix the problem for them. And this literally exists across a multitude of ways that we learn in our behavioral stages of development. This isn't just like learning how to walk. This includes, learning how to communicate, learning how to read. This goes through all of our different stages where there's this healthy border of support and challenge. And so going back to this second cornerstone or key pillar, what ends up taking place is a child learns, okay, I can show up for myself. I can meet my own needs. And they build out of this a very healthy sense of self, which is actually something that a lot of insecurely attached individuals lack in different ways, right? You see the anxious attachment style, they try to associate their sense of self through others, right? So they literally derive their sense of self from like what people think of them, approval, and do they feel liked and accepted? And that's not actually a really stable sense of self. Fearful avoidance often, numb out or don't have the best sense of self. Sometimes they derive their sense of self from caretaking. Sometimes they derive their sense of self from just literally numbing. And so from creature comforts. And of course, you see that with dismissive avoidance alike, where a lot of dismissive avoidance get their sense of self from like my hobbies or my work, or, they say that dismissive avoidance are good self-soothers, but they're just self-numbers, right? They're not actually soothing themselves. So securely attached people get this opportunity to like really learn who they are, what their needs are. And part of that also, by the way, comes from modeling in the home where needs are often talked about and conveyed. And so there's modeling of actually seeing people like talk about their needs. Like, hey, I need you to be more present with me right now, honey. And there's like discussion about these things. So by proxy, of course, kids learn their own needs that way, but they also learn that, hey, I can meet my needs. I can show up for myself. And they learn to build a healthy, individuated sense of self at a younger age. Pillar number 3. And by the way, let me know what pillars you feel like you had and didn't have. I'm so curious to hear in the comments. Pillar number 3, securely attached individuals, because they grow up in a safe home, usually physically, mentally, emotionally safe home, have much more of a regulated nervous system. In other words, they generally spend a lot more time in parasympathetic nervous system mode than simply sympathetic nervous system mode. Now, there are other factors that can contribute to sympathetic versus parasympathetic, namely things like your state of health, if you're going through chronic illness, that of course, there's like a lot more that plays into all of that. But one of the, again, fundamental cornerstones is that if you are around a caregiver at a young age that is themselves regulated, then because we tend to entrain our nervous systems at a very young age with our caregivers, it's, a form of attunement that we've actually adapted in order to survive and evolve, right? Because we really lean on our caregivers. Well, if you're really attuned to a caregiver and they're constantly anxious, I can't even tell you how many clients I had over the years who they had like a relatively stable home at times, but for example, they had a parent who was just extremely anxious all the time. And so guess how that person was growing up, even if they didn't have a lot of active childhood trauma in the home, they entrained with a super anxious nervous system, and thus they became super anxious adults, right? So there's a lot to this, and children are wired to be hyper attuned to their caregivers, to pick up on social cues, micro expressions, body language, tone of voice, all these different things. And the statistic is, I believe it's 93% or 94% of communication is nonverbal. So if you're constantly around somebody who's in this anxious state and they're dysregulated, and they can also be dysregulated because they're numbing out, right? Some of you get caregivers like that. They can also be in an angry state where they're passive aggressive and you can just feel their anger boiling over and all of that pent up resentment and frustration, maybe for the other caregiver in the home or towards their own lives. So you can see all these ways that we entrain with nervous systems that are unhealthy. But securely attached individuals generally have a very healthy baseline of having entrained with people who spend more time in parasympathetic, which is rest and digest mode. And this equates to being more regulated throughout life and for longer term periods of time. And so this can be obviously tremendously beneficial. Number 4, you will also see that securely attached individuals learn how to communicate. Okay, this is a cornerstone of interdependency. If we can't share our needs with somebody and share what we need with somebody, then we can't co-regulate with them. And then what you're going to see, like you see a lot of with dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidant attachment styles, is you're going to see a lot of somebody feeling like they can't communicate. And so they can't co-regulate. So in order to re-regulate themselves, they need to take time and space away from everybody. And there's a difference between being introverted versus not being able to co-regulate. If you're introverted, you'll need some time to recharge. If you can't co-regulate, you may actually derive energy and joy from being around other people, but that may always be short-lived and you'll easily burn out. If you don't know how to share your feelings with people, share your needs, receive help and support. If you're ever going through a hard time, you're going to see yourself retreat or withdraw. And generally, that is a sign of poor co-regulation. Yet securely attached individuals generally grow up in a home where co-regulation is taught. The ability to communicate needs and say what we want to feel better and receive support from each other is modeled. And so this is a really, really healthy and helpful thing. Now, before I get to the last major pillar, I want to let you know that this is also founded on a whole bunch of research about integrated attachment theory, how to actually reverse engineer these patterns and rewire them, leveraging neuroplasticity and the subconscious mind to actually change our attachment style. This is through a lot of work I've done over the past almost 15 years. And if you just want support on how to actually change your attachment style, you can check out any of our attachment style healing courses. We have them for individuals, but also for people in relationships. You can check any of these out fully for free. They all come together for 14 days. And we do this for Mental Health Month. This happens twice a year that we do this. One of them is right now. And we don't know if we're going to do it the second time this year. So it's just available for a limited time, and you get access to all of the courses for free. You can search your attachment style healing course on the dashboard, or you can say like fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant, and it talks about how they heal together. Or fearful avoidant with anxious attachment style. We have them for every course, for every attachment style individually and every pairing. And this is designed to really help you understand how to rewire these things at a subconscious level. And it really gets deep to the source, to the roots. So we can reverse engineer the neural pathways of what somebody has when they're securely attached. So you can check this out for fully for free. You can download all of the materials, the coursework, all that good stuff for a limited time. And it's just being offered right now. So make sure you don't miss out, and you can check out that link. Last but not least, securely attached people have healthy boundaries. They intimately understand that the power of closeness in relationships doesn't just happen when we're on our best behavior or having our best day ever. No, the power of intimacy and closeness in relationships exists within the fact that like you can share yourself when you're having a great day, but if you're having a hard day and you need to say no to something, you can share that too. That is sharing your whole self with somebody, not just the part of you that's always in yes mode. And that's actually part of what builds intimacy, is allowing you to be seen in your yeses and your nos, in your good days and your not good days, in your truth overall, and who you actually are. And so they're not really big people pleasers. They usually end up being there for people and very available and supportive for people, but they also won't do things that go against themselves. They're really good at taking themselves into consideration when they make decisions. And this is because they get modeling in childhood that they literally are taken into consideration when choices are made. They're asked about their boundaries. Their boundaries are honored. They're positively reinforced growing up. And so they have a lot of conditioning that says, boundaries are good. Boundaries are healthy. Boundaries are safe. I will be accepted when I set boundaries, and they're not afraid to set them as adults. Whereas a lot of insecurely attached people think that boundaries drive people away or will get you abandoned or rejected. And this simply is not the conditioning of a securely attached person. And it simply is something that needs to change in insecurely attached people. So I am so curious, which ones did you see yourself in here? Which ones did you have parented growing up? Which ones did you not? Comment down below. I would love to hear from you. And let me know if you want to see more work or have supportive resources around securely attached content, because I'm happy to share that with you and build content accordingly. And thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I hope you share this with somebody that might benefit or be in need. And I hope you like this video. It would help me out a lot. And thank you so much for being here. I'll see you soon.